Hello, my name is Joanna and I am a rising third year. I keep forgetting, sorry. I'm a rising third year medical student in New York City, and today I am giving you part 2 of how I studied in first year medical school. And here is part 1. Please watch that before you watch this video and talk about how I studied in the actual M1 portion of my program and not like the pseudo M1s that were in graduate school. I mean in undergraduate. So in the first video, and why you should watch it is because in the end, when I talked about the fundamentals portion, the fundamentals course that I took, I spoke about it in blocks. So we learned it in blocks. We had histology, we had histology, physiology, pharmacology, microbiology, and path sprinkled on top, and then anatomy plus embryo and osteology were its own course. So I incorporated that system when I entered the medical school. So each module, we are an organ system based curriculum. So for each organ system, I went through it in blocks. I did histology, embryo, and anatomy first. I did physiology second. I did pathology, and pathology also included the microbiology, and I'll talk about why that's important soon. And then pathology, and finally I did pharmacology. So I will talk about that's the system I use for every single module, both M1 and M2. That system every single time. Histo, anatomy, embryo, physio, path, pharm, every single time, without fail. I will talk about the resources I generally use for every module, and then I will talk about some exceptions and specific things from certain modules, and then I'll talk about what I should have done. So for histo, I don't have the book on me. I only have the 2 books from the thumbnail, but I also use organ systems. So normally for histology, I would read Junqueira's. I mentioned that book in the first part of this video, or in the last video. But I read the chapter of Junqueira's for each organ system to begin. I'm a bit of a slow reader, but I would basically try and force myself to finish whatever chapters were necessary within 3 or 4 days maximum. Mostly 2, but within 3 or 4 days. So I read Junqueira's, and Junqueira's took care of histology, but it was also a great overview of the whole module. So that's why I would suggest Junqueira's. But if you don't have time for Junqueira's, you can also just read the histology section of your organ systems book if you have one. I love organ systems. I'll talk about how I incorporate it in like a second. So I started with Junqueira's, and then for embryo and anatomy, I read the beginning section of organ systems. So I would read the anatomy and embryo from organ systems, not from first aid. First aid comes in later. So I would read the embryo and anatomy section of organ systems. For modules where that just wasn't enough, where I just needed that extra oomph of information, I would pull out my high yield anatomy and my high yield embryo. Those books, A1, really, really good. They're still review books, but they go into a little bit more depth than your organ systems book does. Like not even more depth, but it just, sometimes they'll have a bit more information than your organ systems. So I had those around for whenever I needed it. Physio. So what I did for physio is for modules that were a bit harder, I read Costanzo. Don't do that. Costanzo is an amazing textbook. I'm a textbook junkie, as I've said a little bit before. Costanzo is a great textbook, but it took time. And also Costanzo actually wrote BRS Physio. So read BRS Physio instead of Costanzo. And just go to Costanzo if you need a little bit more information for understanding. But I read Costanzo, and looking back, I should have just read BRS Physio and where I was going. For pathology, I actually used Pathoma. Pathoma is an amazing resource. I suggest everyone have Pathoma. It's awesome. But I think that I may have preferred using sketchy pathology instead and saving Pathoma for dedicated study for step 1. And here's why. Sketchy Path kind of goes more in depth and covers more pathologies than does Pathoma. So Pathoma is a great thing to review for your board, but when you're learning for like in-house, well, we didn't have in-house assessments, but when you're learning for like class exams and they're really going through everything, I think I would have preferred Sketchy Path. And when I'm trying to watch it through, not all of it, but what I can get through now that I'm in dedicated, and it really has lots of nuggets of information, like pearls. That's what I've been finding as I watch through some of Sketchy Path. So I think I would have liked to have all that extra info during the course material as opposed to using Pathoma. But that's just an observation I'm making now. Pathoma is still great. I still pass all my exams. So if you just want to use Pathoma, use Pathoma. But I'm using Sketchy Path right now, and I think it's awesome. So if you want to use that, use that. So then I use for Pharm, Sketchy Pharm. That was it, Sketchy Pharm. Sketchy Pharm is just my life. I love it. I love it. And then as I did all of that, I would use that resource and also read through that corresponding section in organ system. So for that system, I would read the pathology while I'm doing Pathoma or Sketchy, if that's your situation. I would read through the pharmacology while I'm doing Sketchy Pharm. So that's what I was doing for that. And also, as I'm going through each of those things, I am doing questions. So the questions that I would do questions from review books first and save my QBank. The QBank I used was RX. I also used past tests. I also used AMBOSS. Not used, but like I've experienced the questions. I used trials of them, and I just always went back to RX. So what I would suggest you do, my number one tip, is when you start medical school, that first class, that first module, do a trial of a QBank. Some of them have 48 hours, like I think past is 48 hours. Some of them have a week trial. Try one out, pick one you like. I tried out, actually I didn't even try it out. I just picked RX in the beginning, and then I tried the other ones later on and just kind of fell back on RX. But I bought RX 360 that had the questions plus the videos plus like the flashcards. And I'll talk about how I incorporated all of that right now. So actually no, in a second. So back to questions. I started off with book questions. So the review books I used are many. I did thousands of questions, and the reason why I did is because the very first module we had was musculoskeletal and derm, and I failed. And I was so surprised that I failed because I had been going through that system. I just told you that system was already in place for my first module because my tutor told me that, because that was his system. Because my tutor is super smart and he's awesome and he liked us. So I went through that system and I failed, and I was like, Joanna, what happened? What happened to you? And I realized why. It's because I didn't do questions. So I retook the MSK exam after having read organ systems and done questions, and I passed very well. And so from every module after that, I started the system of questions. So as I was going through each topic, whether it was histo, anatomy, all of that, I was doing review book questions first, and those review books were but yeah, so I did all those questions, and by the time I finished all those questions, I probably done like 200 or so questions, and then by the time I'd gotten to that point of finishing all the book questions, I had finished going through that system I just mentioned from histo to pharm. So what do you do now? Here's what I did. That's when I grabbed my first aid. So I read through the chapter of first aid. Sometimes I would read it while watching the RX videos, just because the RX videos forced me to read it through and annotate this. So I would do that, and then after I do that, I would answer RX questions, and I would make sure to finish all my RX questions before the exam. So by the time I got to each exam, I'd use a source for each topic. like each branch of it, I guess. I'd use a source for each of those. I use organ systems, and I read through this. And the week of the exam, I would read through this again and maybe 2 more times. So I'd see this by 2 or 3 times before the exam. And that's what I did for M1. If it sounds like a lot of work, it's because it is a lot of work. Med school is a lot. There's a lot of studying. You have to, it is a full-time job. It is a full-time job. And I feel like looking back, I probably would have done a bit better academically if I had devoted more time to studying, because I was working part-time all of M1 and M2. I was a tutor. I think I mentioned this in my M1 reflection video. I was a tutor, I was a swim instructor, I was all that. And so by the time I did all that, I was tired. But not only that, because I did study really well and I knew my stuff. But the other thing that threw me off is because we had, I now know that we had customized MBMEs, and I think I had been reading first aid and doing the RX questions and stuff, and so I was basically getting ready for STEP. My school doesn't teach to STEP, so there'll be times where I would focus a lot on what was in first aid and what was on RX, but in class they were emphasizing another thing. So if I can go back, basically what I would tell myself, don't read the slides. No, don't read the slides. Go through the slides and make sure that you are emphasizing what they are emphasizing. So if there is something that they emphasized a bit more in class than you see in first aid, I'm gonna review that a bit more, and that's what I should have done. And I was reading stuff and I was reviewing stuff that's important for STEP, but wasn't deemed as important enough for my exam, and we were being tested on other things. Prime example of that is during repro. Repro was actually what we took in M2, but during repro, I remember there were 5 or 6, and our tests are 100 questions, so that's 6 points already on just urinary incontinence. And I remember being livid because in my version at the time, I didn't get 2020 first aid until 2020. So I was still using the 2017 at that time because that was last fall, 2019. So I was still using 2017 first aid at that time, and urinary incontinence in here is 1 line. So I was like, oh, not too important, throw it away, right? No, I missed 6 questions because I didn't properly review urinary incontinence. And the reason why I should have known to review urinary incontinence is because we had a whole 3-hour lecture on the types of incontinence. So I should have known that it was going to be important enough for multiple questions, but I was ignoring the lecture schedule. So keep up with your lecture schedule to know what is important to your professors and to your course director, so that you know how to kind of divide your time, because all these resources are great, but they are heading towards STEP, and your class exam is not STEP, so you have to adjust ever so slightly. Now for the special exceptions. Oh, the other book you saw me holding up, this one, Step 1 Secrets. I did use this for a couple of modules. I basically just used it at the end of the module. I had gotten through all our material. I had read through organ systems. I read through first aid. And then the week of the test, because tests were on Friday, that week of the test, I would start reading through first Step 1 Secrets. It's not a must-have, if I would say. It's like a nice. I actually got this for free from a Step 1 coach at school. So it was nice to have. If you have it, use it. If not, it's not an end-all be-all, because as you noticed, I already did so much to get to the exam date, so much material, so many questions and all that, so it wasn't necessary. It was just like the extra on top. So other exceptions were, so we took MSK and derm first. After that we did cardio. Cardio is one of those subjects where if you do have access to or want to try Boards and Beyond for cardio would have really helped. Boards and Beyond is one of those things that if you want to use one resource, you know that whole system I talked about, and I was using multiple different resources throughout each module. If you want one resource for everything, one resource that would go through the anatomy, physio, pharm path, I would suggest Boards and Beyond. I think it's a good all-in-one resource. Many might disagree with me, but I think it's a good all-in-one. So if you want one resource to do it all for you, Boards and Beyond. So I did watch a few Boards and Beyond videos, especially for like the different charts in cardio physio, so I found that really useful. For respiratory, which was right after cardio, I had to go back and watch the sketchy videos for all the respiratory bugs because that's super important. So I made sure to watch Sketchy Micro again for that. After respiratory was GI. GI is another place where you're going to want to watch the micro videos for the GI bugs. And just GI as a system is intense because it's like a marathon. There are so many pathologies in that system. So that's what I did there. Next was endocrine. Endocrine, I love it. I love it. It's my bread and butter. But endocrine was a subject where I did actually go through this book. And I did enjoy the endocrine chapters here. I just enjoy endocrine. So I think that's why. After endocrine was renal. Renal was another topic where I used Words Beyond. So cardio, renal, pulm are like a trifecta I tend to think of. They're very interconnected, cardio, renal, and pulm. But for cardio and renal, Words and Beyonds really helped to explain those physiology things to me. And to be honest, I didn't use them in M1 when I should have, but now that I'm going through it again for STEP, the Boards and Beyond videos are really helpful in explaining them to me. Osmosis videos also are helpful for GI, especially. Osmosis videos came in a lot, and they helped me to understand some of the embryo things and things like that. So osmosis videos, if there's something you want a quick video for what you don't understand, type it into YouTube, try it out. Or you can even, what I did for one exam, I can't remember which one, but I think I did a free trial of Osmosis Prime just so I can get access to all the videos, watched a bunch of them, and then just didn't renew the subscription. I do have Osmosis Prime right now for dedicated. After a step, when I pass, because I'm going to pass, but when I pass, I will actually do a detailed video about the resources I use and resources I wish I didn't. So I won't really talk about Osmosis Prime right now. But because I've been rambling for an ungodly amount of time, now that I have gone through my exhausting system of studying for M1, I hope that many of the resources I've mentioned will be helpful to you. I hope that the systems I've mentioned will be helpful to you. Honestly, the best thing to do is just have a plan that works and keep doing it. Once you find what works, keep doing it. It might be completely different from what I'm telling you, and that is perfectly fine. Everyone has a different way of doing it, but once it works, don't fix it. Do what you are doing and you will pass. That's all I want for you. I want you to pass because we need more doctors. So I should say that to myself. I want me to pass. It was so nice to film this video, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Please comment down below what other videos you want from me, because I have really been loving filming lately for whatever reason. Yeah, so thank you so much for watching. Bye. I'm saying after a lot, I'm sorry. When I became an